Hello. Throughout this pandemic, I've often heard the phrase that things will never be the same again. But I have to ask, is that really going to be the case? Because that's largely up to us as individuals, and our ability to sleepwalk back into pre-COVID behaviour shouldn't be underestimated. Certain changes will be enforced upon us. Travel requirements, for example, may change. Rules will probably be imposed on the layouts of leisure and workspaces and how and when they can be used. And there'll probably be compulsory health checks. But unless changes are made mandatory, we can very easily fall back into old routines and just forget everything else that we wanted to take forward. So change will require some thought, some effort and some understanding. I've said for a long time that people and businesses, instead of having to-do lists, should have stop-doing lists. And one advantage of this pandemic is that it's really enforced the effecting of stop-doing lists. Despite life constantly evolving and changing around us, habits and routines are hard to break. It's easy to hold on to the old furniture to the point where the only reason given for doing something is, well, we've always done it that way. The pandemic has forced changes that would never previously have been considered. I mean, can you imagine sitting around a boardroom table in February before this all started and proposing that you shut all your working premises for 3 to 4 months, make all the staff work from home and ban face-to-face meetings just so we can see what happens and whether any good ideas come from it? I think at best it would have attracted quizzical looks, and at worst it would have probably been regarded as an interesting way to resign. But as we exit lockdown and life adopts its next phase of the new normal, now is an excellent time to review what you've not been able to do over the past months and think very carefully about whether certain pre-COVID activities should really be consigned to the now obsolete activity bin. You may be surprised how quickly this bin fills up, and you may be surprised at the costs you're binning as well. And this releases resources that may be better employed to further the post-COVID strategy for your company. So whether in your business life or personal life, take time to consider what has really worked during this pandemic and what you'd like to maintain and build upon. Then make sure you build it into systems and processes to make it part of the rhythm of the business or indeed your life. Building this structure will give those behaviour changes more chance of being adopted for the longer term. And for activity that needs to be maintained or resumed after lockdown, consider whether or not there's now a better and maybe more acceptable way of doing it. And an obvious example would be the use of Zoom meetings and video conferencing to communicate with clients and staff. But don't assume that because it may have worked well for you during lockdown that it is an acceptable form of communication to your clients going forward. A review and a consensus with them over the style and frequency of communication, is required if this technology is to be incorporated. Then if you wish to encourage its use, consider offering a different pricing or proposition model if business is to be conducted in that way. The crisis has forced us all to break habits and to innovate. But is it a case of things won't be the same again, or is it the fact that they shouldn't be the same again? If so, how will you maintain, leverage and amplify those enforced innovations that have proved so beneficial? There is a danger of applying new innovative practices on top of old pre-COVID practices that are now considered unfit or certainly less fit for purpose. So just pasting the new innovative practices onto the old, but without reviewing all of the associated processes and policies in the light of the pandemic experience, there's a strong possibility that these good practices that you've come to terms with throughout lockdown, however well intentioned, just become temporary. They need to become part of a robust process to stop us naturally sliding back into pre-COVID behaviour. That behaviour then reverts back to being the status quo, and inertia and resistance to change is reapplied to those old behaviours. Then in order to stimulate change, we're back to making seemingly extreme proposals around the board table as the benefits of the processes put in place for the pandemic are then labelled as just temporary for the crisis, or they're forgotten altogether. So exit this lockdown with purpose. A consequence of not doing so may be that at some point in the future you'll find yourself susceptible to feelings of lockstalgia and start questioning why you didn't keep doing the things during this period that you not only found more efficient but preferred and actually enjoyed. Keep those stocks of goodwill, compassion and empathy replenished. I think we're going to need them for some time to come. Thanks for listening.